Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilman Ed Reisinger, Chairman of the Land Use Committee. Welcome everyone to the investigative hearing. We're here for City Council Resolution 19-0159. We're reconvening the information hearing from November the 13th. The purpose of inviting representatives from the Department of Public Works, Law Department, Office of Information and Technology, Health Department, Mayor's Office of Emergency Management to appear before the City Council to discuss the effectiveness and sufficiency of measures being taken to address basement backups of all sewage in the city. As I said, the committee held a hearing on this resolution November 13th. We heard agents' reports and public testimony at the hearing. Then we recessed. Before I go to Councilman Burnett, chief sponsor of the bill, Matt, you want to go through your script?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to go over a brief presentation on some of the tools for Webex before we begin. Okay, so everyone should have these controls in the bottom middle of their screen or close to these. So on the far left is the control for your microphone. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. Next to that is control for your video. We ask that when you're speaking, you turn on your video. Otherwise, you can leave it off. In the middle, we have the participants button that will allow you to see who is participating in the hearing. Chat button here. If you need to send a message to the committee staff or panelists, you can use that function. More options that I'll talk about in a moment. And then finally, when you're ready to leave the meeting, that button all the way to the right. And if you click on the more options button, you'll have the option to raise your hand. Excuse me. And we will use this function for attendees from the public to let us know if they wish to testify during the hearing. If you've downloaded the full version of Webex on your computer, that the raise hand function may be in the bottom right hand corner instead of in the more options menu. And on the top right hand corner of the screen, you'll have view options. So you can have the presenter screen with participants off, presenter screen, and the participants shown below, or all participants organized in the grid. And just some quick best practices for Webex hearings. Try to find a quiet space with good light and a strong internet connection so you can be seen and heard. Turn on video when you're speaking. Identify yourself before you speak. Mute yourself when you're not speaking. Speak slowly and clearly. Be present. Be patient with yourselves and others. And wear headphones with a microphone to cut down on background noise if possible. Public testimony for computer users be coordinated by the committee staff. Use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to testify. You can raise your hand at any time, but you'll not be recognized until the public testimony portion of the hearing. And each speaker must state their name prior to testifying. Public testimony for phone attendees is a little bit different because we cannot identify anyone by name who is called in. And so each person will be unmuted one by one. The attendees on the phone will hear 2 beeps when they're unmuted. If you do not wish to testify, when you hear those 2 beeps, just say you have no comments. And if you do wish to testify, please state your name and then proceed with your testimony. If we're not able to understand what's being said, we may interrupt and ask that you call back to try and get a better connection. Mr. Chair, with your permission, I can do roll call for the committee members.
Go ahead. Go ahead, man.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, when I call your name, please indicate you're here. Chairman Reisinger.
Here.
Vice Chair Sneed.
Here.
Councilman Clark.
Here.
Councilman Costello.
He's just walking away.
Okay, I will note he is present. Councilman Dorsey.
Here. And just Councilman Pinkett just sent a note to ask to be elevated to panelist status.
Thank you. Okay. Councilman Pinkett. Here.
Here.
Councilwoman Middleton. Councilwoman Middleton. I do not see her here. Councilman Stokes.
I am here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want to go back to Costello, Councilman Costello? He's here.
Good.
Okay, thank you. You finished, Matt? Yeah, okay. So at this time, we're going to go to, I'm going to recognize the sponsor of the hearing, of the resolution, Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and agency staff from DPW and finance for joining us this morning. Mr. Chair, I don't have a whole lot to say. I just wanted to make sure we can jump right in, but thank you for reconvening this very important conversation. I thought our last hearing was very productive in discussing a very important issue that not only impacts my constituents, but folks all across the city, you know, and are still dealing with the outcomes of old infrastructure and the wastewater backup issues that people are dealing with, and we'll probably hear from today. But I'm very interested in learning about the progress that the agency has made on this particular program. I will acknowledge I've definitely seen an uptick in the marketing of the program, especially around rain events. But just, you know, there's always ways to make it better. So, you know, looking forward to hearing where we are right now.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it. At this time, we're going to go into agency reports. Public Works, DPW.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Garbark. I'm the acting director of the Department of Public Works. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on this important matter. As I'm sure everyone knows, the Department of Public Works manages 3 separate utilities. So we have a drinking water system, a sewer or wastewater system, and a stormwater system. Our stormwater system is designed to handle most rain events, but we have seen a steady increase in the severity of storms over the past few years. I think everyone witnessed last week, we had 2 extremely powerful thunderstorms go through the area, and each one of them dumped close to 2 to 3 inches of rain on the entire region in under an hour. These severe storms overwhelm the storm system very quickly. They can lead to flash floods, other emergencies. What they also do is they seep in and infiltrate into the sewer and wastewater pipes. These are cracks, these are openings, these are gaps. Because our infrastructure is aging, water gets in there. This quickly overwhelms the sewer system as well, which is moving untreated sewage to the wastewater treatment plant. The stormwater gets in there, it quickly overwhelms that. As a result, the sewage backs up, and it either comes out of what's called a structured outfall or in people's basements. When we first entered into the consent decree back in 2002, there were a number of structured outfalls that the city had. This would allow for untreated wastewater to go directly into streams like the Jones Falls, other streams, the Gwynns Falls. As part of the consent decree and under the directive from the Environmental Protection Agency, we sealed nearly all of those outfalls. Discharging sewage into waters of the United States is a violation of the Federal Clean Water Act. So that was one thing we did. However, this, like all water, like all fluid, goes somewhere else. And the next place it went was in people's basements. So as part of the modified consent decree, which we entered into just a couple years ago, DPW agreed to implement an expedited reimbursement program for people who experienced this type of overflow. The program allows for residents to seek reimbursement for up to $2,500 for costs incurred in cleaning up and restoring their property when a backup was caused by a capacity issue in the sewer system during a storm event. Now, I want to stress that the program was a pilot program. It established a baseline for what a program had to look like. We've heard very loud and very clearly from our customers, from our stakeholders, from the council, that the program needs to be expanded. And that is what we are doing. So since we met in November, since the last hearing that we had, we've established at DPW a task force that has been meeting every other week consistently throughout the period, including during COVID. This issue, as you all know, inspires a tremendous amount of passion and a tremendous amount of conviction in what needs to and should happen. So within DPW, we have had a number of, I'll call them robust and somewhat passionate meetings on this issue as we've worked through, how we can enhance and expand the program. So we met with representatives of other utilities in the area, specifically the Washington Sewer and Sanitary Commission, and to talk to them about how they handle these issues. And we also did research around what other utilities are doing around the country and around the world. Also, since the last hearing, we formed what is really a positive partnership with Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Chris Haney, who testified at the November hearing, is going to be leading a team to research evidence-based solutions for environmental equity in Baltimore. It's going to be specifically geared to climate and home flooding issues. The DPW team is going to be led by the chief of our Office of Equity and Environmental Justice, which we established earlier this year, and that's Ms. Linda Batts. It will be leading that engagement from DPW. So in terms of the specific enhancements that we can do now or later, we're kind of bucketing them into those two types of buckets. So a first phase would be the immediate changes we can make, and the second phase would be sort of the longer term changes to truly enhance us to a next level. So for short-term enhancements, we've done the following. We are increasing the reimbursement cap from $2,500 to $5,000. While we strongly urge residents to call and report backups to 311 within 24 hours, it is no longer mandatory to do that. So people can report it when they have time and when they're able to. Reporting it earlier lets us get out there quicker and lets us begin investigating it quicker, which is why we still urge that. We've also created and distributed significantly 3 different brochures and pamphlets. And we have really doubled down on our marketing and communications. We have our community liaisons have been proactively meeting with the communities that have the highest number of basement backups. They have been meeting with community leaders, and we've had DPW employees attend countless community meetings to talk about this issue and to distribute the pamphlets and the the brochures. Liaisons have even canvassed door to door in some of these neighborhoods, providing the handout to individuals. And we've included the information on our water bills. We've also really tried to promote this through social media, as well as through press announcements when there are weather issues, that we alert the press and others about certain things. We've been making sure to put in information about this program in those announcements, and we've also made it prominent on our website. Additionally, what we are doing, we are in the process of developing a contract. What we're trying to do is work off of an existing contract with the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission to bring vendors in for cleaning, so that when people call 311, they don't have to then worry or wait to get someone to clean their basement. So these will be vendors who will be certified or approved by the city, who will be sent out immediately to clean issues. Now, this is again for the reimbursement program for the weather-related events. This is the stuff we're doing right now that's in that framework. We also continue to research, and we continue to reach out to our partners all over the country and even the world. We've actually reached out to some folks in South Africa. They were experiencing not only a serious, they've been experiencing all sorts of issues, and we've been reaching out to them through different groups, and are really looking around the world at these issues so we can learn from some of the best. So that's sort of the first stage, the immediate stuff we can do right now or in the near future. The second phase, or what we're terming longer term, is DPW is working with the law department right now and the finance department to consider expanding this program from wet weather to any weather event. Because we know that these backups don't just occur when it rains. These backups occur when it's dry, when it's a bright, sunny day out, because something's clogging the line or something else is happening. We view this as a public health imperative, especially right now where people are home because of the pandemic. People have their children at home. There are seniors who are basically confined. Some are confined to their homes because of them being at risk. We view this as a public safety and a public health imperative, that we are working through the legal issues and the funding issues to try to expand it to any type of backup, so that we can get a crew out there immediately, without question. So we need to work through some of those considerations. We've already reached out to the Baltimore Civic Fund to set up an account for potential grants that could be used to fund this program once it's off the ground, to supplement city spending on this, so we can make it as robust a program as possible. And we're also working to consider what HomeServe could provide in terms of enhanced services, because they have a commitment as a certified vendor to provide the insurance for exterior line coverage. They also have made a commitment to serve low-income residents. So we're looking at what else could be provided through HomeServe as part of that program to help augment or supplement what we're considering in this program. So finally, these are the items for the program that I'm talking about, but the real issue is the system and fixing this once and for all. And the way we do that is through our capital program. And I want to just say I'm thankful to the City Council, to others, that DPW has retained its bond rating this year, so we can continue to borrow at a very good, favorable rate. And we have not cut our capital program. We are continuing with all of our projects. And this means that we can be on track to eliminate these backups and to meet our consent decree requirements. When we actually open the Headworks project in a number of months, less than a year away, at Back River, we believe through our modeling that that's going to take care of nearly 80% of the backups. After that, we are then going to work on individual capacity projects. So certain areas of the sewer line that we know are constricted, we are actually going to then work on those to expand them. Once we do all of this, that would take care of these issues. That's the real big picture, systemic picture way of addressing these issues once and for all. So that is our presentation. We have the brochures, and I believe we have distributed them to many of your offices, and we have them online and are happy to distribute them to anyone. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Matt. Deeply appreciate your presentation. Councilman Burnett, you're first. You have any questions or comments?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Director Garback, for the presentation and definitely for the changes. So I had a couple quick follow-ups on what was presented.
Certainly.
So I guess when we had the hearing back in November, it was mentioned that there were legal barriers to changing the cap. I guess if you could speak briefly on how those were resolved, and are there additional prohibitions that are keeping the agency from making other changes to the program?
Yeah, so happy to speak to those. There were a couple of different issues. The first issue related to the use of utility funds. The charter says very clearly that it is to be used for the system, the wastewater system. There was a debate, as I said, there's been some very passionate debates within the agency about this program. And one of the legal issues that was raised was, what can the utility funds, the wastewater funds, be used for? We have now consulted with the law department, with the various members of their council, and there is a way to work. There is a way to use it in a manner that's appropriate. So it will require actually going to the Board of Estimates and changing some funding sources in other areas to make sure that this is legitimate and that this is actually appropriate to be used as utility funds. The other issue was on liability. And the concern was the city admitting fault and opening itself up to being sued in a lot of other areas? We have worked through that as well. Talking with the law department, I know Mr. Heinrich is here, he helped tremendously. We're viewing this as a city service, as a public safety, public health service. And there are ways to say that this is a public service that we have to provide in furthering our efforts as an agency of the city without admitting liability. So there are other services that the health department, that other departments provide, that don't admit some level of liability to a problem that they're providing as a public service. And we talked to the law department, and we believe we can have this addressed through that vein of saying that this is a public health issue that we have an imperative to act on.
And on that, at the last hearing, there was a lot of sort of confusing and conflicting responses from DPW and finance around the status of the $2 million allocation for the pilot program. DPW said the money is in a separate account. Finance said it was not in a separate fund. And so just asking for clarity on where that stands, and finance wants to weigh in as well. That may be helpful, but yeah, where are we with the actual allocation? Is it in a separate fund? Are there audits? Can you just give us a little bit of an overview on that?
Happy to, yeah. So I mentioned we have 3 utilities. We also have 3 separate funds, 3 separate enterprise funds that are completely distinct from the general fund: water, wastewater, and sewer. This program is funded out of the wastewater enterprise fund. So what we do when we go to budget everything was we look at all of the expenses that we have accrued or that we are going to accrue: contracting, overhead, hours, salary, all of that different stuff. And we make sure that we maintain a minimum amount in the wastewater account to pay for everything. The $2.5 million is one of those expenses that we make sure has to have that minimum level of of accounting for because it is planned. We signed a consent decree document that committed that. So we are legally bound to ensure we have that funding available. So it's basically an accounting item that is one of our expenses that we have to account for every single year, but it is specifically located within the Wastewater Enterprise Fund.
Okay, got it. And Mr. Chair, I have one more, if that's okay, for this round.
You got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. So in the quarterly report, it was mentioned that upwards of or around 70% of the applications for the reimbursement program were denied due to maintenance issues. Does this include maintenance issues within city-owned infrastructure that the city is responsible for, or are there other things that would fit under that category?
That's a very, very good question. I'm going to defer to Mr. Yosef Kabedi, who should be on the line, who has really taken the lead, he and his team, on the technical details of this program. Yosef, are you on?
Yes. Good morning. So, as far as the criteria used in the acceptance or denial, I would need to refer this to Paul, since his team oversees the Expedited. Paul.
Sure, happy to assist here. So when we're referring to maintenance issues, we're merely stating as sort of a shorthand that this is not a capacity-related surcharging issue. This could be a choke that was occurring during a dry weather event, during a wet weather event. It could be in the public or the private system. The point is that it was an application that had followed the correct procedures. They had timely submitted. They had probably timely notified the department of the incident, but it was not a surcharging event due to capacity. It was due to some other maintenance issue.
And just quickly on that, so that could be a city side issue that could be the reason someone was denied. Is that
correct? Yes, it could be a choke within the public side system. Yes,
right.
But that is not what the program currently is designed to address.
And Councilman, that is one of the enhancements that we believe we can address with our second phase of this. It is a very limited program right now to the wet weather events and about just the capacity holding of the rain. But we recognize that if people have raw sewage in their basement, it needs to be cleaned immediately. And it's better for the city to ensure it's done properly through some sort of certified vendor. And we're working through that process now to find a way to expand it to the other issues like you're talking about. The maintenance issues, a clog somewhere or a choke somewhere else that causes that to happen. So that's what we're working towards right now.
okay? Mr. Chair, I'll let the other members jump in, and I'll go back around.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Before I go to other committee members, I just want to announce that Councilwoman Middleton has joined the hearing. Any other council or committee members have a question or comment?
I do, Mr.
Who's that? Councilman Stokes?
Yes.
Go ahead, you got the floor.
Oh, okay, thank you. Ms. Director Garber, I want to first of all thank you for response at Lanvale Washington Street. We found out we had some chokeholds there, and Bethel Henry and his staff. But I want to know, can you give this committee an update on work? Because I know you're building a whole new infrastructure there. Is there any way you can give us an update, if you don't have it in front of you, to this committee, so we can know where you are on that particular work that's going on, so it can relieve some of the stress on these water lines and maybe reduce some of the floods that we have in Baltimore City.
I'm sorry, I missed what you actually said where the location was.
I believe it's the Bowley's Lane work y'all doing. I think is a $10 million project that's really going to help out in some of these floods that we have throughout the city because it's
Sure.
going to relieve
Okay.
some of the pressure.
Yeah,
Can you just
I
give us
don't
an
have that.
update if you don't have it?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can certainly get that and get it back to the committee. Yep, I'm happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other committee members or council?
I have a question. I don't know how to do the hand.
Yeah, Councilwoman Clark, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to thank the Director of Public Works and all his people with regard to flooding in this rainstorms. Between the two major storms, I contacted Stormwater and asked them to clean out the inlets, etc., in one of our big flooding areas, Barclay and 31st, in that Able area. And they did. And so they did it so fast that by the time the second downpour came a day or so later, they didn't flood. And so thank you in the midst of everything for that quick action. It really saved a lot of cars.
Thank you for that, for those comments. I will pass that along to the maintenance folks.
I'm just want to follow up a little bit. What is the status now? You were talking, first of all, thank you for your plan. It sounds great. And thanks to our lead sponsor for just making us just work with you to get through this as we're doing. So basically, you are mentioning working with Washington and now in the long range plan, getting people on contract who could be plentiful and available enough that they could get out there and clean ASAP. What is the situation now with regard to that kind of an incident? Like, in other words, sewage in a cellar. Does Public Works have any provision? We used to go in and clean, but if we're doing it now, I must have missed that email. So where do we stand now? And your aspirations are to put people on contract by when?
So yeah, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. Yeah, our maintenance staff years and years ago used to go into people's homes. Our folks are good at cleaning up sewage and disposing of that. They're not necessarily skilled at removing drywall or disposing of carpet that's been damaged or furniture. We were getting into some issues where things were getting destroyed or not being done properly. And then and it was better to have a professional do it. We don't right at this time have the vendors on contract, but what we're doing is under the city procurement rules, we can enter into what's called a cooperative agreement. So if another public entity has competitively procured the services of these vendors, we can just piggyback on that contract.
And that's where the Washington Senate.
Yes.
They
competitively procure it.
How soon can we get there?
We are working on the paperwork as we speak. It needs to go through the city process for review. I know that we want to make sure that if there's a way to add minority business goals for the area, that we can make sure that that happens. One of the things we really, really want to do is have the vendors training other people to do this work. Because as you said, there's a lot of this work out there. And one of our fears, though, is getting to a point where the vendors are just going to be too, it's going to be too much for them. So we're working with them to figure out exactly what their capabilities are, and that's going to determine the number of vendors we sort of put on these contracts. So that's where we're working through now. We're working on the paperwork. As soon as that's done, it'll be through the process and then appear at the Board of Estimates.
So your presumption is that you're doing short-term now, and long-term will be as soon as you can get this together.
So this is short-term. What I just described to you is short-term. This is in the coming weeks, coming months, like 2 or 3 months.
With the vendors and the cooperation and the...
Right. This is under the current program as it stands with its current parameters. So it's wet weather, it's surcharging, it's the capacity issue.
It's not yet maintenance issues.
Right.
It's
the wet weather issues that come up because of the weather.
It's
the second piece,
and sewage gets mixed in and ends up in a cellar.
Right. The second longer term phase is to expand that to any event. So that no matter when people call in about a flooded basement, for sewage, these crews go out immediately. That's where the big, tremendous volume of calls is going to come from.
Okay.
And we need to make sure that we have vendors that can respond immediately. Because, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, that's just one of the big sticking points right now. And we then have to work through the procedural and legal issues about expanding the program to be something larger than it is right now.
And so basically, given the capacity requirements and no maintenance requirements yet, but they're coming, you hire vendors now through your cooperative agreement with DC's sanitary sewer system. And then the big issue is when people call in, whether it's capacity or not. And, but you will have these vendors coming online before you are able to get the maintenance part addressed.
Yeah, we're trying to get the vendors online as soon as we can.
Excellent. We can't wait. Thank you.
Neither can I.
Wonderful report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other committee members or council persons have a question or a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Councilman Pinkett. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to go back to some of the questions that Councilman Burnett was asking as it relates to the claims. So if somebody's claim is denied, is there a grievance procedure, or how does, what's the process that an individual goes through to, I guess, appeal their claim?
Certainly. Mr. DeSantis, are you still on the call? Can you answer that?
I certainly am, and happy to. There is not a formal dispute process. There is none, required under the modified consent decree. We have done this informally, and frequently it is myself having a conversation with an applicant who was turned down. To be clear and to not conflict the issues, this is for the expedited reimbursement program. Claims, they will still have an ability to seek and file a general liability claim with the law department.
So there's no grievance procedure? I mean, and then you said they just have a conversation with you?
Generally, that has been the case.
So the program this is an expedited reimbursement program as it was set up. The next step after the expedited program would be to actually file a claim with the law department. Now, what I'm going to say, and Paul might kick me and others might kick me, but if we are putting water bills and others through a review process with the Environmental Control Board, I don't see any reason why this shouldn't go through that either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine a process. So who what department, what which department in DPW does this program come under?
So it's run under the Office of Legal and Regulatory Affairs. And there was never a formalized grievance process. It was more of an informal, people questioning it and talking back and forth. And if there was an issue, then, you know, the director, the deputy director, whoever it was, would get involved and look at it. But it was never officially formalized into the grievance process. But I want to do that. I think that is a very good point you raise. And I have every intention that we will add this to some of the more formalized processes to grieve, billing, and other decisions by the department.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm trying to understand. I mean, no, thank you for doing that, because it just seems, I mean, one, there should be a grievance process, but I don't know everything about the Office of Legal and Regulatory Affairs, but it seems like that particular part of the department would be in a position to, I guess, to defend public works. So how do you get your program from an entity that's designed to defend and get some resolute? That I don't how.
So it's the program is you know, is being moved, and I know Paul is probably delighted to have that, you know, taken and moved somewhere else, because he has a million things going on. But Joseph Cabetti is going to be running it with Linda Batts, who is our equity coordinator, because it is an equity issue, and it's also a utility issue, a utility-wide issue. And I think what had happened was Mr. DeSantis's office and his predecessor were the main contacts and the parties involved in the consent decree negotiations themselves. I don't know if Mr. DeSantis was or Paul was, but I know his predecessor was involved. So I think anything that was consent decree related just sort of went to that office. Once we've sort of gone through the pilot and gone through these things, we can make some changes and put it in a different place that's you know, could be a little differently handled and performed differently.
Okay, no, thank you. And Chairman Reisinger, if I could ask just one other question.
Go ahead, you got it.
So I know that earlier it was said that 70% of the claims were denied. So how many claims were actually processed, and what's the average time for the resolution of those claims? So
again, a great question. And the answer is something that is concerning to me. And I'll tell you the answer. I think Joseph and Bethel Henry are on, but we have marketed this a lot. We tried to push it out as much as we can through as many avenues as we can. Joseph, how many claims have we had? Since January?
So fiscal year 2020, if we're talking about the Expedited Reimbursement Program, we've had a total of 20 entries or applications.
So that tells me it's still not reaching the people it needs to reach, or people are not thinking of it or remembering it, or you know, not trusting the city, quite frankly. Right. So that is concerning. I mean, one of the reasons it was written in such a constrained manner was because we thought we would be inundated with requests, and we needed to have a way to sort of prioritize the ones that were you know, truly needed to get to the front. But this is something that is sort of surprising, that we are having so few requests coming in.
Yeah, I mean, wow, 20 requests. So what from your analysis, and I guess the analysis of your team, how many potential claims or potential incidents do you think, you know, happen in that period of time?
Go ahead, Gus.
Councilman Pinkett, one thing to, I think that would be helpful to kind of, you know, frame the number is The expedited reimbursement program as it exists today, as we've already talked about, is for a narrow band of occurrences, right? It's wet weather. There eligibility requirements that's based on calling it in within a certain time frame. So that somehow funnels and restricts the number of people that would apply, because if they're educated about the program and they know that, hey, this is not a wet weather situation, they would not be applying in the first place. The second thing is, big data wise, as far as the numbers go, the vast majority of sewage backups in homes are come about during dry weather conditions. So if we're looking at a fiscal year 2020, we're looking at over 6,000 calls that come in. A good, conservatively now, a good number of that, 75%, would be dry weather. So that would automatically not be related to the expedited reimbursement program.
But to your question, Councilman, we're talking at minimum multiple hundreds of likely events. Yes.
Right, because even at those numbers, there's potentially 1,000 or 1,500 that would be wet weather events. Mm-hmm. And to think that 20 claims are made, out of almost 1,000 potential claims. I mean, we've got to do something about making certain, being more aggressive about making certain that people understand that this resource is available.
Absolutely.
And that they, that it's there for them. I don't, Chairman Reisinger, I can wait to the next round. I do have one other question, but I know that, Councilman Burnett said he had other questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Matt, just before I go to committee members, my question is, if a resident or business owner calls 311, they're the conduit, that call, they get an SR number, does that call go to DPW, and who is the contact person? How's that process work?
Sure. So they call in a 311, they enter a 311 request and say that they have a basement backup, a flooding event, a backup in their basement. That is routed to, we have a team of dispatchers. It's called Control One, and they take the request. They then radio that to one of our maintenance teams. So that's under our utility maintenance division. Our utility maintenance division are set up into 3 groups based on the 3 utilities. So we have our water division, our wastewater, and then our stormwater. So Yosef, do you want to pick it up for then what happens?
Sure. So once the call comes into 311, a few questions that are asked of the caller. If it is determined to be a sewer-related issue, it is routed to DPW, like Mr. Garbark said, Control One, and then Control One would dispatch an investigator. The investigator, on average, we respond to sewage backups within a 2-hour time frame. The investigator goes out to investigate the situation, to understand, what the source of the backup is, and then if additional work is required, that investigator will then call it in for a work order to be generated and a separate crew to come and work on the situation.
Okay, thank you. I'm good. I just want to end, Matt, by saying I agree with Councilman Pinkert that there should be some sort of appeal process, and you say you're working on that. And if you do come up with that process, if you could contact the council,
yes, sir,
office, so he could disseminate your decision on how to deal with the appeal process.
Absolutely.
Any other council members or committee members?
Chairman, if there's nobody else, I do have one other question.
Sorry, I was trying to raise my hand, but you can.
Councilman Burnett?
Wait, go ahead, Council. Okay. So really quick follow up on the expansion of the cleanup operation. Do you anticipate there being any costs to the resident themselves for this service? And I guess a little bit more information on like sort of where this is.
Sure.
It seems expensive. Can you talk a little bit about where the funding is going to come from this?
Sure.
I'm in support of it though. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
Just-
these are the things we're working through right now, but preliminarily, what we're thinking is it's going to be very difficult to figure a way to hash through, a claims process if someone could then bill to their insurance. The easiest, probably most cost-effective thing would be for the city to dispatch someone or crew to just clean it and clean it quickly. And that would involve a sanitation vehicle. They'd suck the water out, they'd suck the sewage out, they'd cut the drywall or the wall board up to where the flooding was. They'll also dispose of anything that's been soiled or contaminated. That's all sort of in that standard process. It will cost money. We pay, in addition, a tremendous amount, and Mr. Heinrich can attest to that. We pay a tremendous amount in law settlements. They're not handled by DPW. They are handled by the law department. And these are legal settlements because of something that happened with flooding or something else. And all of these involve administrative appeals and reviews and document, discovery and this and that and the other thing. And we spend a lot of money doing that and a lot of money paying out in settlements. And we believe that this is a reasonable and effective step that the city could and should take that is actually going to save everyone in the long run. It's going to ensure that someone gets out there and gets that sewage collected before it sits, before there's potential even bigger claim because someone may have gotten sick from whatever was happening because they didn't get it immediately cleaned. We think that that's going to ultimately offset a lot of the cost, but the cost is still going to be there. It would be paid out of our wastewater fund is what we're considering. Our wastewater fund is our largest fund. That's the biggest portion of the bill that you see on your water bill. It's takes a lot of money to treat the sewage, to pump it, to treat it, and then discharge it. We are looking for ways to use the $2.5 million, add some more to that from the wastewater fund, and then see about augmenting and supplementing that with grant funds as well. But that's a big question to be working through is how much this is going to cost as well. But we think we can figure a way to cobble something together to move forward.
Okay. And I had two follow-ups on.
You got the floor. Go ahead, Councilman.
Okay. Totally they're related to two programs, the Law Department's General Liability Program and this one. So could you help me understand? So we've had situations where constituents have applied to either one program or the other. Very recently, we had a situation where someone applied to the Law Department's program because they didn't know about this one. Can you just quick follow-ups on one, what would be the barriers to if someone applies for one or the other to not simply send or merge the applications into one? And also, what information is sent over or shared with the law department if someone applies to the law department's general liability claims program? What information is shared with that department to inform their decision?
So one of the reasons the expedited reimbursement program was added to the modified consent decree was to truly expedite reimbursement. So all the claims with the city are reimbursable. So someone has to then, pay for it or deal with it and then come to the city and seek some sort of claim to compensate or to recoup that funding. It can take a while. It can take a long time because the city is, the laws are for liability and all of those other things. The laws are somewhat strict and somewhat, convoluted. So this program was designed to move it through quicker, to say, what are the quick things the Department of Public Works can do to ensure that this is something the city will appropriately pay for, that we can move this quickly in a matter of days, a matter of weeks, rather than a matter of months or longer. I'll defer to the law department to speak about the official documents that are handled and sent back and forth. So I don't know if it's Kurt Heinrich or whoever else is on.
Good morning. This is Kurt Heinrich. As far as the processes, Councilman, there are two different processes. One is the reimbursement program. One would be under the general liability, and they would be analyzed in different lenses. So the reimbursement program has its general parameters, wet weather events, and whatnot. The law department would look at a claim in terms of whether or not there was negligence. So we would look at it from the legal standpoint of, was the city responsible? Was the city negligent for this sewer backup to occur? As far as the information that is shared, the claim section would request the maintenance information from the department. And that's what we would use in order to make the legal analysis for a general liability claim. And they're not mutually exclusive. A person could file a claim under both. If there are follow-ups, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were done. Yeah, so I guess the question is, we know that people can, has there been a conversation about having just a universal application for both programs? What would be the barriers to something like that?
Well, I believe that the barriers would be that, again, the analysis for whether or not something should get paid are two different analyses that would have to occur. So again, the reimbursement program, and I know that the director has talked about expanding what the parameters are. But again, as far as the law department is concerned, we will be looking at it from a legal liability standpoint under a negligence standard. So it's two different things. It's apples and oranges. So I think.
I guess sorry that interrupt. I guess what I'm really asking is like, I understand that the back end may be different processes that each agency is going through. What I'm saying is, could the departments explore a universal intake? So someone calls 311 or they call whatever to alert DPW that this is a problem and are looking for reimbursement. There's one application they fill out, which triggers on the back end two different processes, but could save these people a step and the marketing a step, because people have to essentially know that both programs exist to apply for both. When a universal application would still allow both agencies to have their independent assessments on whether to pay out or not, but it saves the constituent the step of knowing to have to fill out two different applications.
No, I think I'm perfectly willing to share what we get with the law department, and I'm sure the law department, can't speak for you, Kurt, but you share what you have to see if there's any way that we can harmonize this somewhat, and so that we're all working in the same direction.
Yeah, Matt, Councilman, if I may interrupt, the law department said there's a barrier. What I'm recommending is, let's tear the barrier down. Let's work together for the constituent that calls in that's got an issue. I'm sorry, Councilman Burnett, go ahead.
Oh, we're on the same page. And I think that would be, obviously, that I would just end by saying, let's continue that part of the conversation, because I think if we could, easy as we can make this for the folks who experience something as, traumatic as wastewater in your basement or elsewhere, I think it's an easy step. I mean, I don't think it really takes away from, law department's internal process and DPW's internal process, but it does make it a little easier for the applicant, because we do have a lot of people that at least if they call my office, we're going to advise them to apply for both. And so it'd be a little easier if they knew that on the front end, or if they were calling, wherever they're calling. They may not call a council office or the mayor's office. I'll hand it to Councilman Pinkett. Who else is on the list?
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For Mr. Heinrich, I wanted to know if there's ever been an incident where a application or claim for the expedited resources was denied, but the same incident was approved through the law department process.
Councilman, I'm unable to tell you specifically if that has occurred, but in theory, that certainly could be the case because, as the director was mentioning, the reimbursement program, to my understanding, is only for cleanup. Okay, the reimbursement would only be for cleanup, not for damage to personal or real property. Furthermore, the reimbursement program, at least as it stands now, is only for wet weather events. So let's say, for example, there was a dry weather sewage backup that would be denied under the reimbursement program. That same person could still make a claim to the law department under the general liability program. And again, in theory, that if the liability analysis is made and we determine that the city has some fault for the backup, well then, yes, that backup, that claim could be settled on the general liability end, whereas on the reimbursement program end, it was denied.
But I just want to clarify one thing real quick. It's actually for the expedited reimbursement, you can seek reimbursement for damage. The cap is $2,500. We're raising that to $5,000. So you can seek reimbursement for damages or cleaning or whatever the cost would be. There's just the cap to it, whereas the law department, my understanding is there is no cap. It's what that claim is and the value for it. And also it's the wet weather event. So if someone is claiming negligence on a dry weather event, that would go to the law department under the current program.
Oh, so the law department doesn't review any wet weather claims?
They could. I mean, it would be if someone applies to them, they could apply to us. It right now it's two programs, and I'm happy. Right. I mean, I'm sure I'm happy to speak with the law department how these things can be harmonized somewhat. But it is two different standards. I mean, one is based on negligence on the city's part of knowingly doing something that affected this, like performing poor maintenance, leaving a manhole cover or something, is not repaired properly, versus us knowing that the system is so overwhelmed, but we can't really do anything because that requires a massive investment for the entire system, which is over 10 years or so. So it's two different standards that could be right. That are examined in that result.
But I thought Mr. Heinrich said that they use your analysis in order to determine, in part of their determination. And so the expedited program becomes a de facto screening for what the city is going to do with the law department program, because they're not going to come back and say that the city was at fault when you initially said that the city is not at fault.
Councilman, that's not correct.
Oh, okay.
It does not act as a screening process, and the law department does not consider whether or not the department authorized or denied a reimbursement program claim in its negligence analysis. And there's also Patrick Hancock on the line, Councilman. It supervises the claims unit, and he may have something to add. So I would just leave the floor open for him for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Answer the question.
Can he answer how many claims the law department has approved?
Go ahead.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. This is Patrick Hancock, and I'm the chief of the claims department, a claims office in the law department, or CBI. And yes, we do have data. We looked at some of the numbers. We were asked like over the last 5 years, or since the last 5 fiscal years, how many claims we've had. We have had 393 general liability claims for sewer backup, sewer related type issues. That's just claim forms coming in that could be associated. And over that time, 83 general liability claims were paid. So we do, and I just want to reiterate, when we get a sewer backup claim, our process is to assign an adjuster. We let the claimant know we understand it's a horrible situation, but we then send a request to Public Works so we can find out what really happened there. Public Works, they're out in the field and they know if it was like a sewer, like a shift in the earth, a ground, or some restaurant put something down, or citizens put something down. They actually clear those lines. So they do the work. And if they find down there that there was no, way that the city could have prevented that specific claim, they were just responding. And if they respond in a reasonable and timely manner, because they have to open up down there to see where it happened. Is it on the city side? Is it on the resident side? So when they give us that information back, we look at this from a strictly liability standpoint, just like an automobile accident.
Mm-hmm.
Did the city did they do something wrong, or did the city itself, employees, or did we cause this? And that's how we make the determination whether under the program, under the general liability program, that claim is paid or not.
So in our decision to determine whether something is caused, do we also make an analysis of whether we could have prevented it?
Oh yeah, that is part of the analysis. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that is, if the city, for example, knew about the issue, it was a recurring, ongoing problem. And let's just say, Public Works does a great job, but let's just say if the city, Public Works, ignored it or didn't fix it properly the last time, and we can tie this new issue to that, then there is liability. That's where we would make the determination for that.
And so what's the typical time frame? How long does it take, if somebody makes application to you, I guess whether both if they are denied or if they are ultimately their claim is substantiated and they are, made an award? How long does that take?
Yeah, what's the turnaround time?
It could take a while, and every claim is on a case-by-case basis. But as soon as we get the report from Public Works, it could take a few weeks. It could take even longer. Can
you be a little bit more specific? I've heard Director Garbach, and now you talk about it takes a long time. It talks a while. What are we talking about?
It could take I don't know the exact numbers, but it could take months. It could take months. It depends on how quickly Public Works can get down there. Even if we request the reports, and as soon as we get it, we make a determination.
Okay.
Councilman, this is Kurt Heinrich. I would just add that as part of that timeline, there's also an element of the claimant providing documentation and other information in order for us to properly evaluate the claim and or the amount of damages. So that's also an aspect that affects the time for a decision.
Okay. I know we've been talking about, like 2 different programs, and Director Garbach, I think you mentioned a task force. Is everybody a part of that task force? Because it seems like that it really could be beneficial to that. I hope that everybody's sitting at the table and not, somebody, the law department, working on their program and Public Works is working on their program, but the two aren't necessarily, communicating.
Sure. Yeah. The committee is all parties involved in this. We use different, there are different lawyers that we react to and call for specific things. For instance, the claims process is one issue. For opinions on if and how we do something, that would be, Mr. Petro or Ms. Ruley. So we are actively involved with the law department and talking with them about all the different things that we're thinking about.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other council persons have a question or comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Do,
You got the floor. Go ahead, Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you.
can I go after him?
Yes.
Can we get a little bit better explanation here, kind of the standards of liability? It's easy for me. Let me say, as an understandable point of reference, relate this to potholes. If a person reports a pothole to 311, the city has noticed that there's a problem. And if a car then hits that pothole because the city doesn't fill it and damage is caused to that car, I understand the city to be liable for that damage. And if nobody had reported the pothole, then the city essentially can deny any awareness that there was a problem and a potential liability there. And so the city, doesn't end up on the hook for any damage to any car. I have an email in my inbox just from a couple of days ago. I'm going to read a part of it. It says, I have submitted multiple 311 requests regarding the storm drain on Harford Road. When we get a heavy rain, the cover of the storm drain gets lifted by the water, and then the drain stays filled for quite a while. My basement also floods every time this happens. So far, the only thing DPW has done is put the cover back on the drain. It seems there is a blockage somewhere, and this will continue to happen until they clear the drain. Now, it seems that DPW understands that there's a problem here, and also that there is not, in fact, a blockage. That this must be some sort of capacity issue, some general capacity issue. I don't know. I am still awaiting, and I understand it's going to take some time for DPW to maybe look deeper into this. But nonetheless, the point stands that this is an ongoing, repeated issue that DPW is aware of, and this person's basement floods repeatedly as a result of this. Can you relate this to how, the city's awareness of, say, a pothole is a similar scenario, and what the expectation is here, the standard?
Yeah, I can answer that. So what you're referring to with potholes is something that we do explain to claimants. And just like sewer backups, most of these claimants are finding out about this office if they've never dealt with it before or filed a claim with the city. They find out after they call 311. They say, I just got off the phone with 311. I hit a pothole or I had a sewer backup and they told me to call you. So when we explain to them, here are the issues, here's the form we need you to provide, we will request reports. A lot of times what we find out is that in that specific pothole instance, if it is sometimes it's the dead of winter and the pothole formed, and if we find when we get our report back from DOT that there was no record of that pothole, then it's what we call a prior notice. It's sometimes difficult to explain to claimants, to citizens, but yeah, it's a long-standing position. It is supported by the law.
Maybe I want to make clear that I understand that fully, and I've used that as an example of how I understand the principle of prior notice.
Right.
Does the principle of prior notice hold with basement flooding as well?
Yes, sir. So the same way, if we find that DPW went to the site, and this was the first time, for example, this had happened. We had no belief that this, or no, notice, just like the claimant, that this would happen, and it happened. Then we apply that standard. We did not have a prior notice that the sewer backup would happen, and sometimes, even if it is a recurring issue, it could, I think you explained, it could be an infrastructure issue. And that is a much longer term fix that's basically comes down to, I don't know the specifics of the sewer grate that you're talking about, or the storm grate, because we do get those, but if you send it to me, I'll look at it. But for example, that could be just an issue of a wet weather event, how that road is designed, how that sewer manhole was built 50 years ago. I mean, we do not have any information yet, and that could be a recurring problem. It doesn't necessarily mean that Public Works has been negligent. If they've gone to the site and sometimes they put a robot down there, or contractors, put a robot or a person actually down there, and they pull out all kinds of, let's say, tree branches or trash that people threw on the street. They clear that.
If there's no blockage, I guess I want to know if there's no blockage, if it is purely a matter of stormwater capacity based on, the infrastructure was built to a certain capacity at a certain time, whatever. And we have repeated issues of there being not enough capacity for wet weather events, then is the city liable for the overflow of basic capacity that has nothing to do with blockages?
Again, on a case-by-case basis, we'd have to look at it, but typically, no. I mean, I think off the cuff, I think of if there's a design issue, if it was improperly designed, maybe that could be an issue, and we would certainly consider approving a claim if something was just done improperly. But if it's a capacity issue, it's the way the roads were built, and it's doesn't necessarily mean there's negligence.
So it's case by case?
Oh, every case is reviewed by an individual adjuster. It's a case-by-case basis. Every claim gets specific attention and review. It's all based on the details of that specific occurrence.
Councilman Dorsey, go ahead.
Maybe I'll just ask kind of one more time. So if it's, I'm not, you use the term road. I'm talking about the pipes buried in the road. I'm talking about there's more water going into the storm water system than those pipes can handle at a certain point. And as a result of that, water is coming over the stormwater system's capacity. If it's purely a design capacity issue, is this something that a claim can reasonably be settled for, or whatever?
I'd hate to just give generalities, but I mean, we could look at that. We certainly could.
Can DPW respond to Councilman Dorsey's question?
Yeah. So I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the legal standards necessarily, but my understanding of how the expedited reimbursement came to be is exactly for what Councilman Dorsey is saying, that we know there are areas and we know that the system lacks capacity, but it is a long-term fix. So we agreed that there needs to be some reimbursement, something provided to people who get that capacity related overflow. That is why we made it, it was easier and it was quicker and it was defensible to make that program the way it was, in that rather somewhat restricted sense, being only for water and only for capacity. So that's what we're talking about.
And let me chime in for a moment here, because we're conflating the sewage capacity issues with a stormwater capacity issue. And those are two very distinct issues under the law. We construct to a design standard. There will always be storm events which can inundate or exceed the capacity of stormwater pipes in the system. That does not establish liability or negligence. There has been a growing amount of case law with climate change throughout the country. And there are cases nationally which are, getting a fair amount of attention. And what the general rulings have been, and I'm thinking of cases in San Diego and elsewhere, is that there is not a responsibility to upsize a stormwater system, only to maintain the existing system that was constructed according to appropriate standards at the time it was built. And that is how the case law seems to be shaking down nationally. Councilman, does that answer your question?
That answers my question. Thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome.
So, Councilman Dorsey, you done?
Paul answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Clark, you have the floor.
Thank you. I have to excuse myself, and before I do, I would like to just, I'm a little confused about this conversation. I think you're clarifying it, but here's my problem. With all due respect to the claims department of the law department of claims, I have claims that have been in that office with no answer for months and months, years. And basically, it's a different process. It's slow. People must be overworked. They don't, it's not a very responsive system because they're so overwhelmed with work. Okay. So that's one thing. This is another thing. This is a system that's to expedite attention, immediate attention, and to expedite reimbursement. I pray it is not going through the normal claims process, but is subject to a more immediate and process that is associated with this modified agreement and not with the whole claims department. In other words, yes, it's very interesting to talk about how people could go to make two claims. All I'm saying is this: don't mess with what you want to do with this reimbursement system, because it's got to be fast and it's got to happen within people's lifetimes. And so whatever happens with a claim with the law department, the regular claim, fine, but they shouldn't be tied together, because that will delay everything. Because you hear in a normal maintenance type of claim that it's going to take forever because everybody has to chime in about it. This is supposed to be streamlined so people get help immediately and they get reimbursed immediately if they meet the standards. I'm just saying, please don't mix these two so that the reimbursement program gets tied into the normal law department claims process. Thank you.
Very well said, Councilwoman. I just want to add that if we could condense our questions or comments, we still have our agencies. We have like 16 callers waiting to call in. So any other council members or committee members have a question for DPW? No? Okay. Now we will go to the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. No one from Mayor's Office of Emergency Management.
Mr. Chairman, this is Matt Stegman from the Mayor's Office. I think we had a issue previously with another hearing where the folks from MOEM did not receive the invitation. So I don't know if that was the case again, but I will look into that. It does not appear that we have anybody from MOEM at this time.
Okay. That's why we need a city administrator. Health Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. DePaul Nibber on behalf of the Baltimore City Health Department. Also, thank you, committee members as well. We continue to work with DPW around this issue, making sure that materials are disseminated regarding remediation of sewage backups. Outside of that, we don't have anything to add with respect to our testimony from the previous hearing. Then we continue to acknowledge that this is an issue, and we're very glad to see that the city has ramped up its efforts to address it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any committee members or council people have a question or comment for the Health Department? Going twice? Okay. Thank you, Paul. Law Department? Anyone from the Law Department? Talking to some people from the Law Department. Anybody here have anything to say? Testify, comment? You have any response to, I'll talk to the Law Department.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been in conversations between DPW and answering questions for the council people and committee members, but do you have anything to add? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Department of Finance.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Department of Finance, we stand by a report. We don't have anything additional to add. We have sought to clarify the question of, is there an additional fund or not? I think we've clarified that point. Regarding payouts from the fund, we defer, and the accounting of the fund, we defer to DPW and to the Law Department, and have nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the council, city council? No? Okay, thank you. That ends the agency reports. Now, Matt, we will go on to public testimony. You ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder for everyone who has joined us by computer, we ask that you use the raise hand function in Webex to let us know that you would like to testify. I think a number of attendees did coordinate with Councilman Burnett in advance, but it would be helpful to still have you raise your hand just so it's easy to find your name in the list. With that said, we have first person is Cronshi Englander.
Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. Hello, Councilman Burnett. Congratulations. I haven't seen you in a while. If you had a frequent flyer program for the DPW cleanups, I think I would come under that program. A week after I bought my house in 1984, I got flooding in my basement, and the former owner, who happened to be there giving me a baby gift because I had recently given birth, said, "Oh, by the way, you might want to call the city on this." That was the beginning of a long relationship. They knew where to plug in their sewer cleanout machine. They said to me, "You're not the lady who used to live here," which told me that I was in for a long, long relationship. And indeed it was. The city was out there frequently. I got to know your crews by name. There was no program at the time for cleanup. I was the one who ended up cleaning up for the city at that time, my husband and I. And some of the things that you have said here make me very, very glad, because most recently on May 1st of 2019, I got to know the city crews again. There had been an agreement previously with the city to come and do regular preventative maintenance. Obviously, that sort of fell away to the wayside, which is why I got to deal with a sewer problem in May of last year. But several of the things that were said are very heartening. But for this program, as someone who's seen this from the other side, you really need to publicize this program, because it is a public health program, especially for people who are getting older like myself. Cleaning up sewage is not something that we should be doing, particularly since it's everybody's sewage if you're at the end of a line like we are. Response time has usually been quick. I have to give the city that. But if you're coming in and if you're doing that cleanup, you're going to have to help people document what has gone on, especially if they're going to apply for insurance on their own. Because if you come in, clean it up, there is really no evidence, unless the homeowner has done it themselves, of what has occurred. So there has to be documentation both from the city and from the homeowner, and that has to you have to make sure that happens. If you have people who are frequent flyers like myself, and I'm sure that DPW has problem properties, you need to come out and do preventive maintenance if possible for those problem properties if the problem cannot be fixed permanently. We found that preventive maintenance of the main line did a fairly good job of preventing backups in our home, and we would much rather not have the backups and not have to visit with our friends from DPW. And also, the fact that you're lifting this statute of limitations for the problem is also very heartening, because when you're cleaning up your basement after a flood, the last thing you're thinking about is saying, "Oh yeah, better call the city before the deadline occurs." And hopefully this program will do something for people like me who have had to manage on their own, because, as I said, the city was not cleaning up after that. They said, "No, ma'am, that's not our job." So if you have any questions for me, I'd be delighted to answer them, but I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Appreciate you calling in. Matt, who's next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Cynthia Ross.
I'm trying to.
Ms. Ross. Ms. Ross, are you there?
Yes, good morning. How is everyone? I can probably piggyback on the, thank you very much for having this morning. I can piggyback on the previous caller who certainly I don't have as many frequent flyer calls as she had, but I've had two. And it turns out that I also am at the end of a line. And when I first called, the response was fast. They came out. They actually could not find the manhole, which had been buried in my, unbeknownst to me, buried in my backyard for about 50 years. They were able to find it. They said that there were several chokes in the line, but short of blowing out the line, unfortunately, toward my house, which then blew all of the sewage back into my basement again. It was contained into the bathroom. I was also told that the city did not do cleanup. That was last August. They came out occasionally to check the line, and then they stopped coming. Then there was another backup that then flooded the entire basement. So then I was told to, when I called again, they was told to call 311 again, and they said to put in another request. But my question was, why would I put in another request since it hadn't been fixed in the first place? So then pretty quickly, I'd say within a day, they had a private contractor come out, and they actually did clean out the line. And there were several chokes and then a broken line at the end of the street. Since then, thankfully, I've had no problems. I did call. I do have Home Serve. So I called Home Serve. They were the ones that sent out Roto-Rooter. Roto-Rooter cleaned it up. It then went to my insurance company. I believe that my insurance company is doing a mitigation currently with DPW. So that's where I am right now.
Can you tell us what the address is in the street so they can take it with the SR number?
Sure. It's 700 Highwood Drive. That's in Lake Walker. 212.
Okay. Thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Scott Wilson. Mr. Wilson, are you there?
Sorry, am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I guess, I appreciate the previous callers, and I also appreciate the discussion this morning. I'm calling just to share my situation, and I think based on some of the discussions, I have some thoughts that I'd also like to express. But I've lived in Baltimore for 6 years. The first house that I lived in did have a water backup issue. I'd be calling DPW or a plumber every 3 to 4 months to snake the line. That was kind of the Band-Aid fix that would usually address the problem. It always occurred during, high rainwater scenarios. But I moved out of the house last year. The house was completely gutted and renovated, and I fortunately saw the house go on the market and moved back in with a brand new house, all new plumbing. I know that everything has been addressed. I was hoping that I wouldn't be moving back into the same situation, but it turns out first week of living in this new house, we had sewage water backup. We called ServPro. We had people come out and clean up. We're having contractors come fix the bathroom, but I put in a service request for 311. They were very quick to respond. Had them come out several times. And my concern is that I appreciate this reimbursement program, what it's set up to do, and I appreciate DPW's working through this, the current situation with the shutdown and all. But to me, it's not clear what the process is going forward as far as the determination of whether the city should be responsible. In my situation, I'm 99% confident that it is not a private sewage line issue. It's just, they've come out, they scoped the line, and their determination was that there was no blockage. I've asked that they review the video or come out again to determine whether it's a damaged pipe, because all indicators are suggesting that that is the case and that it's on the city side. And I guess I don't want to go through what Miss Englander has been going through for the past 25 years. I want to, have a path forward to have the city not just remediate the sewage backup, but actually address the underlying infrastructure issue. And I appreciate you guys are doing that at a large scale with looking at capacity issues and such. But I also don't see anything on the DPW website detailing what the next steps are, after an investigator's come out to make a determination. And also documentation, again, like the last caller made a point of, it's pretty much on our hands to document, and I don't know how to further determine whether how to assume liability of the city in this situation. So I think that's something that also should be looked into, is what the process is for actually moving forward with a determination as to whether the city should be responsible for coming out and fixing the infrastructure, not just remediating the sewage backup. So that's all I have. I appreciate you guys listening. And,
Yeah, Scott, can you give us your address, and DPW have someone from customer service contact Mr. Wilson?
Sure. The address is 913 South Streeper Street.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible to get the address for Miss Englander, the first speaker?
Yeah, she's still on the line, Matt?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can unmute her now.
Yes, Ms. Englander, can you give us your address?
Sure. It's 6201 Biltmore Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland 21215, and it is the clean out. The problems are on the city side of the sewer is on the Pinckney side. I'm a corner house at the end of the main line.
Okay, Youssef, do you have that?
We have it, and someone from my office will be reaching out to address these issues that come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Englander.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Alice Volpita.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Alice, you're good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Wonderful. Sorry, this is my first virtual hearing, so this is all new to me.
Just have fun with it. We're good.
My name is Alice Volpita, and I'm the Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper at Blue Water Baltimore. So thank you, Councilman Reisinger and honorable committee members, for holding this important hearing. We really appreciate it. Our organization, Blue Water Baltimore, has been advocating on the issue of sewage backups and overflows for over 10 years. And Blue Water Baltimore is actually the only third-party plaintiff intervener to the modified consent decree for sewage overflows. My role as your local waterkeeper is to speak on behalf of our waterways, but also to amplify the voice of more than 1 million people in this region who live within the Patapsco and Back River watersheds. And these people are taxpayers, they're voters. These are people who are experiencing catastrophic sewage backups into their homes when it rains. These are families with kids who are swimming just downstream of explosive sewage overflows after it rains because they don't know any better, because those swimming holes aren't posted with proper signage. So these are the people we're talking about that really need your help. We're really excited to hear about the expansion of these programs that DPW has shared with us today. And to be honest, the concept of direct assistance seemed so foreign and so far away just 8 months ago, when our coalition of advocates proposed it during the last hearing in November. So we are delighted to hear that this agency is moving in that direction. This is really, really exciting. We're excited to hear about the relaxed restrictions on applying for the program as well. But despite all of that work that DPW has done so far, these preliminary results from fiscal year 2020 that we've received are abysmal, for lack of a better word. And I think that DPW touched on this fact in their own testimony. But the fact that only 20 claims were filed and only 2 have been approved, with those claims still being under review, no money has been paid out in fiscal year 2020 out of a dedicated $2 million. So despite this increased outreach that has occurred, people clearly still don't know about this program, and DPW obviously needs to do more to promote it. And, we appreciate these updated brochures, but ultimately, these 3 brochures that now exist with different pieces of information that people really need, splitting it up into 3 brochures ultimately decentralizes that necessary information, and it actually makes the process harder to navigate. There's a flow chart in one of these brochures, but it doesn't have all the necessary steps for residents. So there needs to be a really simple infographic with clearly laid out steps for a resident. And these brochures don't do nearly enough to communicate the risks of coming into contact with raw human sewage. So, our organizations question whether or not public health experts were actually consulted in the creation of these documents, because we're talking about raw human feces that are carrying dangerous viruses into our homes, and people need to know about that. So with the pandemic in the forefront of everybody's minds, the big concern is COVID. But the truth is that we've always known that exposure to raw sewage can put people at risk of contracting hepatitis, leptospirosis, gastroenteritis, and a whole host of other itis infectious diseases. So while the scientific community is still trying to figure out if COVID is transmissible through sewage, ultimately, we don't really need to wait to find out. We already know that sewage backups are destroying property, dignity, and public health. And this is the type of information that residents need in brochures, not necessarily the intricacies of DPW's own internal processes for determining liability. And I'd also like to know when the city's policy of accepting applications after that 24-hour window changed, because this is a huge change, and this is critical information that needed to be shared with community members, partner organizations like ours, and the general public as soon as it was implemented. We've had people very recently experience sewage backups, but because they didn't know about this change or the program in general, they haven't applied to the program because they missed that initial 24-hour window. So we've had people reach out to us saying, I experienced a sewage backup last week. What do I do? And as their local water keeper, my response has been, well, you have to submit a claim within 24 hours. I'm really sorry, but you're no longer eligible for the reimbursement program. But when did that change happen? And are applications going to be accepted retroactively now that this change has been put in place? Based on 311 data, we know that there's over 5,000 reported sewage backups per year. And that's just doing a very quick analysis of the data for wastewater, sewer water in basement in the 311 Open Data Baltimore website. So I understand that these restrictions are being relaxed to help more people in the future, but there's also so many people who could benefit who haven't been eligible for this program, but now are. Thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions that anybody has.
Regards to communication? No? Okay, well, Ms. Volpita, thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Gustavo Ballesteros.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for letting me speak today. I'll keep my comments short, but my name is Gustavo Ballesteros, and I'm an intern at Clean Water Action. I've been focusing on interpreting and summarizing the quarterly reports released by DPW. And as mentioned, we noticed that many of the reported backups occurred without a rain event. We even identified some discrepancies with the reporting of rain events in the reports when comparing it to NOAA rain gauges. I'm glad that DPW wants to expand the program to better accommodate the thousands of backups occurring every year, and I hope that this second phase happens as soon as possible. Thank you for letting me talk today.
Thank you. Next caller. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Laurel Peltier.
Hi, everyone. I am going to share my story at 4 Belmore Road, which is in District 5. And from everything I've heard, it's really great news. I'm just going to share that my situation doesn't seem to have been any more perfect as far as sending in an application for both a law request as well as the reimbursement program. So on July 4th in 2019, there was one of those supercells, 4 inches of rain. It was up sort of in the Stoneleigh area, which is the stormwater systems above my house. I'm right at the tip of the Baltimore City. And I had just cleaned out my sewer main. By the way, I have home serve. I'm on this. You guys might remember I'm the Green Laurel reporter at Baltimore Fishbowl. I even knew about these backups, and I never put a backflow preventer in. And sure enough, about 6 o'clock that night, I walked into the basement, and you know the drill. So I actually knew I needed to call 311, and I did. So I got that done. And I was really struggling to get someone to clean it up because I called ServPro and lots of people, and I just punted and said, all right, I'm going to have to call USAA, which I was kind of bummed because that makes your homeowner's insurance go up, but I was just stuck. So $5,000 to clean up, about $15,000 in new flooring. I feel extremely lucky because it sort of happened quickly. It happened in about 4 days to get it cleaned up. It was tough to get some of the stuff out because certain people won't touch rugs. Anyway, I had lifted a lot of stuff up. It was not a huge claim. It's $20,000. We sent in, with my insurance company, I thought, a fully loaded application to both the reimbursement program and the law program. And it looks like my reimbursement was just lost. And I got kind of confused because I did get a nice note from Baltimore City saying that they're looking at my claim, the Department of Law. And I sort of assumed that was for the reimbursement program. I just found out that on March 4th, my insurance company got a letter that was denied. And this was just, from what it sounds, a classic rain event. The stormwater got into the sewage system, about 600 gallons went back up into our basement. And to date, I don't have anything on the reimbursement program. I feel extremely fortunate because I had help and I also knew the whole process. And I can't quite explain why things got lost, but I am just going to resubmit my reimbursement claim. I don't know if it was the city hacking or what. I've heard other people have had a similar situation where that short-term reimbursement claim just wasn't processed. So as of now, the basement's all put back together. I did put in a backflow preventer, which you could have heard me cursing a lot that I didn't do that. I paid a plumber about $1,500 to install that into the basement. So this house shouldn't have this happen again. But I don't know what else I could have done. And as of this point, I have received no reimbursement. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it very much because it's hard to explain when this happens to you. It's awful.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Leah Brown.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I have had several backups into my basement. I recently actually got the backup flow valve, I think the lady just said before, and we had a heavy rain a couple weeks ago, and even with that, I guess one of my children flushed the toilet and the basement still flooded. It luckily only went into the bathroom. Once again, as another lady stated, the people that come out, they know me. Like the guy was like, "Oh, you again?" So this has happened maybe 5 or 6 times. 2 times I've actually called the insurance. I've never put in a claim through the city because I never knew anything about the program. And then I was going to last time, but apparently I missed the deadline because I guess you only had a couple months to put it in and I missed it. The last time we had to call it into the insurance company, because of where I live on 3501 Milford Avenue, which is right by the county line. They actually told us that because we lived in the city, I should have got a cheaper contractor. They were not willing to pay the claim. Of course, COVID hit, so we literally were without a basement for months, um, just like waiting for the insurance to come around and finally pay the claim. We had to go back and forth with them. They finally ended up paying it. Um, the basement had sewer water. I think this time was, I'm not sure the date, but the last time the basement flooded really bad and we had to call the insurance. It was our block. The power went out. So not only do we have the sewer water coming in, the power went out, so the sub pump stopped pumping. So we literally had 2 or 3 standing feet of water in the basement. It was horrendous. I have a 5-year-old who has asthma. The whole house reeked of sewer. And I called the city. I want to say 5 in the morning. Finally it stopped raining because they said they had so many calls. They didn't know when they were going to come out. What ends up happening with us is somebody will come out, they'll look, we'll usually get a young guy. I have to go out there and argue with him because he wants to tell me that he sees the water is flowing. And I'm like, hey, listen, I'm at the end, the water's coming in my basement. It might be flowing, but it's flowing into my basement. That's always our situation. So finally he'll put it in and then somebody else will come in, they'll flush it out, and then luckily it'll stop. But we have been down there ourselves, sub pumping, not sub pumping, using the vacuum and just trying to get everyone else's sewer out of our basement, including our own. And it's truly disgusting. I don't know what needs to be done. I know I had put in a claim with the city. They were supposed to send cameras out or some type of camera, they said, to see if there's like tree roots. I don't know what else can be done, but something has to be done. My basement has flooded literally 5 or 6 times, with 2 of those times being feet of water. And the other times we are just down there trying to clean it up ourselves. And it's like me, my husband, and my son who, we should not be cleaning up sewer water. So something definitely needs to be done about this situation. I'm done. Thank you for letting me vent.
Yeah, hello, yeah, can you tell us your address so we can have someone from DPW to get back to you?
Yes, it's 2501 Milford Avenue, 21207. I will say a lady has been contacting me. I forgot to pull up her name, but she has contacted me several times through email and even a phone call, and that was really great. This last time has been a much better experience than the past. I will say that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Matt, were you on? We okay now?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Coons.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Yeah, my name is Jennifer Kinsey. I'm the Maryland Program Manager at Clean Water Action, and we've been working on this issue for a couple of years. And I am really excited to see all of the changes that DPW outlined at the start of this presentation, lifting the requirements that people contact 311 within 24 hours, and lifting the cap to $5,000, although we maintain that $5,000 is not enough. It's a massive step forward, and these 2 changes will really help this reimbursement program help more people. Most significantly, the program to offer immediate direct backup assistance with this contract that is DPW says is in the works will be an enormously helpful step forward. People should not, regardless of what caused the sewage backup, people should not be in the position where they have to choose to clean up sewage out of their home. At any time they carry it, at any time it's extremely dangerous, but especially now during the pandemic when we know very little about coronavirus, but research is showing that it may be detectable and even spreadable in sewage. It's a possibility. It is critical that the city is providing this as an emergency public health measure to ensure that no one is put in the position of cleaning up the sewage themselves. So I am very much looking forward to seeing that those contracts resolved and seeing that program getting started. I hope that that's as soon as possible. I also would like to ask when the 2 changes were made, and when they will be publicized to the public. Because as Alice says, people who weren't aware that those changes had been made still would have thought up until this point that their application would not be processed because they hadn't called 311 within 24 hours when it was. And I would also ask that those changes be made retroactive to people who applied for the reimbursement program and were denied because of not calling 311 within 24 hours or for any other reason. I think as Acting Director Garbark said, the lack of people applying to this program can be attributed to a couple of things, but one of those things is really people having lost trust that this program can help them. And people who have gone through that, seeing a change that their previous applications are now being accepted, would really go a long way to rebuilding trust with the community and towards spreading the word that this program is a meaningful option for people. I would also ask that once the city is providing direct assistance, the expedited reimbursement program being restricted to people only to reimburse people for direct assistance would potentially be redundant. So I think it would be really valuable to explore ways that working together between the law department's claims process and a revamped expedited reimbursement program, the user experience of this, for lack of a better term, could be improved, whether through a universal application, as Councilman Burnett was saying. I think that would be a great idea, or through having the expedited reimbursement program cover damages beyond property law or beyond cleanup needs, so that people only have to apply to the city once in order to have all of their costs resolved. And finally, I think that this is a really exciting step forward, and I think that the public would really benefit from continuing to get updates about the advances in this program through this forum. And so I would ask that the council recess the hearing as we did in November, so that we can reconvene at a later time in the fall to discuss the continued implementation of these changes.
Yeah, Jennifer, that's the plan, to reset.
Awesome.
Okay? Thank you. Matt?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Jay Monteverde. Okay. Mr. Monteverde, are you there?
Yes, no questions. Thank you. Thank you all for your work, and I share concerns that others have expressed, and look forward to further updates in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
Okay. Mr. Chair, we don't have any more attendees with hands raised. Just a reminder for everyone, we ask that you use that if you're joining by computer or smartphone to indicate that you wish to testify. If you're having problems finding the button, you can also use the chat function to let the host know, and I will add you to the list. And with that, I will start going through callers. We have several. Reminder for callers, when I unmute you, you'll hear 2 beeps, and that is your sign that your turn is up. First caller, unmuted now. No response. Second caller should have just heard 2 beeps. And no response. Third caller. No response. Fourth caller should have just heard 2 beeps. You're unmuted. I think you may be trying to say something, but we cannot hear you. Not able to make out anything. You're welcome to try and call back. And last caller, just unmuted. And no response. Mr. Chair, it doesn't look like anybody else has raised their hand to testify.
Okay, thank you. I do want to state that I know that Odette Ramish was trying to get through. Odette, are you there? No? Okay. Councilman, that's it for the participants from the public. Councilman Burnett, you have something you want to say before we recess? Or you want to go ahead?
Oops, sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah, I don't have anything else. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. I did want to, it was encouraging to hear about the changes that are being made to the caps, the exploration of vendor-led cleanups. I think this is all steps in the right direction. So I do want to commend the committee that's been working on these recommendations. Obviously, we still have a ways to go on the sort of more structural infrastructure issues, but I do want to acknowledge that it's definitely good to hear that there's progress being made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Any other committee members have something to say before we go into recess? No? I want to thank those agency heads, and also what I'm requesting from DPW, from your customer service department, those residents that had given us the address or phone numbers, if you could have your department respond to them, it would be deeply appreciated. So at this time, we will recess and we'll announce another hearing when needed. Everyone, thank you for attending and have a good day. Bye.